will go live really instantly. There you go. We're live.
Wow. Not like the old 4, 3, 2, 1 of the old days where we used to see the numbers flash up.
Exactly. Do you want to introduce yourself and your books because you're marvelous and you'll do it better than me?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kaz. My name is William Shaw, and I write mostly police procedurals featuring a detective called Alex Cupidi. I've also written a couple of thrillers under the name G.W. Shaw. But yeah, this is today we'll be talking about mainly, I hope, Alex Cupidi, because got a new one coming out called The Wild Swimmers, which is
Have you got it? You got it?
out next week. And yeah, it's the 5th in the series or 6th in the series, depending on how you cut it. Because I started off with a standalone and then somehow drifted into writing a series, which I've very much enjoyed, set in Dungeness. Yeah, so that's who I am. Who are you, Kaz?
Just your not so glamorous interviewer for today.
Very glamorous.
Before we drift into The Wild Swimmers, can we just say that both of your author name books are fantastic?
Oh, that's really kind. I mean, yeah. What happened is,
I'm a big fan of both.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's really nice to hear, because it's, I mean, in a way, it's a lot harder for me to do the. I'm kind of known for the detective sort of series, so it was a bit of a funny venture. Like during lockdown, I began sort of yearning to be somewhere else, and wrote. Actually, I started one before lockdown, but they wrote these kind of adventure thrillers, and they're kind of old-fashioned adventure thrillers in that, if you're thinking about detective fiction, it's generally about community, whereas adventure thrillers are about a big bit of the world. And I think when I was in lockdown, suddenly writing about a yacht in the Caribbean seemed like a very nice idea. And I could fantasize about being on a big luxury yacht in the Caribbean in the heat and all sort of dastardly things happening there. So it was really nice escape. And I kind of miss that kind of old sort of adventure fiction where they're kind of adventure romances, really, that kind of style. But it's kind of harder to get going. So I changed my name slightly because I didn't want to always be. I know some people who like detective fiction really don't like other types of fiction. So I thought I'll signal it's a different me by using my proper initials, which was G.W. Shaw, because my real name is George William Shaw. And I've never been called George in my life, except when I turn up to doctors or, bank appointments. And I have to remember that I'm actually called George. On my passport and things. But I've always been called William Shaw, which is why I used it for my main name. So G.W. Shaw was just a way of signaling that it was a bit difficult. We all like a couple of initials, don't they? There's some quite successful authors on here who just use the 2 initials.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to say it works quite as well for me as it did some of the 2 initials authors. But it's been a lot of fun doing it. I'd hope to get back to one of those again soon.
Great. And I was going to ask you about that, if there was going to be more of those.
Yeah, I haven't got one planned at the moment because, between you and I, because there's nobody watching, is that nobody will ever see this video. But The Conspirators was not my biggest success, which was the second in the 2. I mean, Dead Rich did really well. And that after Dead Rich was doing well, my publisher said, oh, let's have another. But by the time it came out, I think they were kind of waiting for this Wild Swimmers to come out. And it's kind of limped out there. So I think at the moment I'll park that for a little bit and see what I get on with. Because in the end, got to pay the bills.
That's really sad because Conspirators was really good.
Thank you very much. I thought it was as well. I really like the idea about it, and it's still under option for film stuff. So we'll see, because those little things give it a bit of a fillip sometimes. So yeah, thank you very much, Caroline. That's very sweet to hear. I think you get very disheartened very quickly as a writer, and it's this thing. And I think that because there's a lot of writers in this community, they'll recognise it, that you kind of you believe your last bad review, really. So because that didn't do brilliantly, I'm sort of trying to put it to one side for a bit. I mean, it did all right. I got some very nice things said about it, and it's not, it's not, but it's probably my least best-selling book in 10 years.
Wow.
I know. I don't like to ask for sales figures because I like to pretend they're all selling millions, but it didn't sell very well.
Before we go into any more questions, because this is lying to us, we've got one comment here that we can see and not much else. We've got a lot of hellos.
Oh, good.
Sarah has said hello on YouTube. Sam has said hello. Donna says hello. I think Steve might be here.
Oh, right. Hi, Steve.
Said hello. He said he's surprised about the conspirators. Leslie Vincent said hello.
Oh, that's really nice. It's such a lovely community, isn't it? It's great that after a while, everybody seems to know, at least a third of all the voices on here really well. There's, there's a lot of people, and it's been really nice over the years to meet some of the people, like Barbara, Steve, yourself, whatever, in 3D. Actually believe you really exist as real people.
It's so exciting, isn't it, when you realise that there's a real person behind you?
I know, but also I'm a bit, this is one thing I always bang on about is when I was a kid, you used to read, and I was trying to say so in that little video I posted. When you're a kid, you read books on your own. You're very lucky if you found anybody you could discuss them with, and if you found somebody who liked the same book, that was really great. These days, books form communities, and I think that's amazing, and this is an astonishing community, and it's not like the only one. There's lots of little communities come from, whether it's reading groups or things like that. But I love the fact that because you've read the same book, you can have a conversation with someone or other, or because you like some of the same stuff. It does bring together in people in most extraordinary ways, because I mean, like, quite a various community, aren't there, on here? All sorts of people from different walks of life, which is very cool.
And I think one of the things that we are getting to the Wild Swimmers, I promise, we just keep getting distracted. One of the things that I really like about you as an author as well is that you're very keen on promoting those book communities and supporting other authors.
I'm just really excited about it. I thought that whole thing about book communities, it just seems really interesting. And it's just like at the time when everybody's telling us we're more divided and argue more, and that social media has driven us all apart because you say one little thing and suddenly everybody jumps on you, so you're afraid to say anything. It doesn't, that's, I know this is really well moderated as a community, and that's part of it, but actually for 99% of the book community, that's not the case. I mean, I've been to book groups where you meet people of obviously opposing views talking passionately together because they share the same book. And so I think, it's all a bit hippie of me, but I think that's a brilliant side to books, that actually it does, because reading a book requires a certain amount of empathy to put on, and if you can see somebody else has got empathy for that sort of stuff that's going on in the same book, it brings you a level of trust for that person, doesn't it? Going quite deep.
I'm going to give you we're going to seek into the Wild Swimmers because I'm going to read you two of Sam's quotes. She said, "Don't believe anything negative, utter nonsense." She's still fangirling over here.
Oh, bless. Thank you very much.
I'm going to agree with her here because this applies from both of us. Thank you so much for the lovely mention.
Oh, bless. Much appreciated. Yeah, I mean, it's good to be part of it.
I got to the end of the book and read mine and Sam's name and sent her a picture.
Oh, very good. Well, I'm rubbish about doing those sort of things like that. Actually, I always forget to thank the right people at the end. So I'm quite glad I remembered a lot of the people this time, or some of the people. There's probably other people going, bloody hell, all that help I gave him, and he never mentioned my name in the back. I try and make little notes, but I generally forget.
So the beginning of the Wild Swimmers is excellent, isn't it? And there's a really kind of lovely scene on the, well, not a lovely scene, but there's a lovely piece of artwork that you mentioned. Is that real?
Yeah, it is real. I mean, so what happens at the beginning of the book is there's a call to Alex Cupidy's house saying that somebody's found a body on the beach up at this place called Penn Bars, which is really an accessible bit. Well, there's actually a track to it, but it's, if you're on the where all the shacks are, if you're on that side of Dungeness, it's a hell of a job to get to where this body was seen. And the first thing Alex Cupidi says, well, is it's a hoax, because there's somebody, and nobody knows when this happened, but in the 90s or the noughties, or even in the 80s sometime, but 90s, noughties, or somebody built this kind of weird sculpture on the beach of a body. And it's this body that's crawling in the shingle, and it's made of concrete. And from about 10 yards away, it looks terrifying. And from about 1 yard away, you realize it's just a lot of concrete that's beginning to break up with age, but it looks just like a body has just died there on the shingle. And it has been reported a few times as a dead body in real life. So I kind of thought, well, she'll think this is a dead body. And it's a, she'll go there because she's still off work. She's been off work with PTSD, but she's about to come back. But she'll just say, well, I'll nip up there. I'll just take a look, just so we've got it in the record. And of course, it is a dead body. And she goes there with her daughter, thinking that it will be the concrete sculpture they've all seen before. Nothing will happen. Her daughter, who's quite a sensitive soul, finds the dead body on the shingle, and that's the body that kind of starts the whole plot off. But that, if you go there, actually, if you I can look around, but I've got I marked it down on what 3 words because it was so difficult to find. You cannot see it because of the nature of the shingle. You can't see it unless you're almost on it. And Dungeness is huge, and it all looks the same. I was trying to triangulate all these photographs I found online of people who'd seen it before, trying to work out in the pylons in the background, trying to get the angle right. But really, it took me a day and a half tramping over shingle to find the thing.
Steve is saying he can't wait for this book. He's missed Alex.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. I mean, I hearing a lot of people say that, and that's really nice. And it was slightly anxiety making because they only let me write a book a year. I'm not like Ellie Griffiths, who can write 2 series, and it means that if I chose to do those other books, that was like 3 years effectively, since the last one. And you kind of wonder, is everybody forgotten her? So it's really nice to hear that, Steve. Thank you very much. I mean, she's a really nice character. I mean, she's not actually all nice, but one of the things I was just suddenly remembering that I based her on is kind of like she's partly based on my mum. And I met this woman the other day who said, I really like Alex Cooperty because she's kind of awkward in her body. And I suddenly remembered, she's about 5'10", 5'11", and she feels too big for anywhere she is. Do you know what I mean? And she's sort of and so it was like this idea of this woman who was never comfortable in her body. And that was very much from my mum, because my mum always felt like that. And this woman was saying, no, I totally empathize. That's just like me. And I like the way that characters make connections like that.
That's really true. I caught up with The Trawler Man as well before this because I was running behind. So I was like, I can't skip ahead.
You have to read them in order, do you?
Yeah, I had to read in order.
That's a terrible sort of affliction, isn't it? Having to read books in order.
But sometimes you just have to. If you really like a series, I think you have to read them in order.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, because it's very. I mean, it does. I try to make them standalones as much as I can, but with these characters that recur, because I personally don't necessarily read series in order, and I quite like working out where it fits when I read it. But I realize a lot of people like to read it in order, and actually bits of this are kind of slightly dependent on the Trawler Man, because in the Trawler Man, she's diagnosed with PTSD and being treated by it. It's very much, the Trawler Man's really all about PTSD, because when I was writing that, which I think is fair enough, after 4 books, if you've seen the grisly stuff any of our detectives seen, you have every right to be traumatized. But I spoke to a police officer, a woman called Lisa Cutts, actually brilliant writer too, and she told me that she had counselling, police sort of led counselling for PTSD herself, and it had been one of the best things that had happened to her. And you always see these tropes in police things where the detective is reluctantly taken to therapy and hates doing it because it's his distraction from the job. And I thought it was really nice to hear this sort of point of view that actually said, no, it's really good, it's really healthy, and it made me a better person. And I like the idea that you could write a character that actually learns something about themselves. So trauma is horrible, but actually in beginning to move through it, because you never quite get rid of that trauma, but in beginning to learn how you can operate it, you actually find something else out which is quite useful to you as a person and as a detective. And that was kind of the idea behind it. So I had to read lots of books about PTSD, which is really interesting, because it's one of the things we're beginning to understand after years of trying to deal with unfortunate sort of people with shell shock and stuff like that, and failing and not really making it better. People are finally finding ways that actually you obviously can't help everybody. Somebody the damage is quite deep, but a lot of people are now beginning to find successful treatments, and they're quite weird.
And I think, following on from that, because you've got that sort of story through the Trawler Man, if you've got fans of the series like Steve and Leslie and all the people who are watching, Steve has just said that's what made the Trawler Man brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Right, you are going to want to read this next book because you kind of are so invested in Alex and Zoe and Bill that you need to know what's going to happen to them next.
Yeah, and it's it's also was really because although she's quite apprehensive about going to work, she's also quite excited because she does like most of us. She quite likes her job, and she hasn't been able to do it properly. So it was quite nice having that sort of sense of finally she's back there. And obviously, if you leave any job for a year or so, everything's changed a bit, and there's different people. So she's got she's got to get her head around the new people and new culture. So that was fun to do as well.
And like new systems and things as well, hasn't she? New people.
Yeah.
There's a great new policeman who's working there, like quite a young one, who's fantastic. I'm trying to get you to tell us a bit about him, because you can tell us about him without any spoilers, can't you?
Yeah, that's I'm going to have to read the book now because I can't read. Yeah, he's quite nice, isn't he?
He is. He's got a nice brother as well.
Yeah, he's a sensitive boy, and he's sort of really good looking and stuff like that. And everybody thinks, oh, here we are. It's going to be because there's this woman Jill who always has various sort of partnerships going on. Everybody thinks, oh, they're going to be going out. But there's this bit of him that is a bit standoffish and a bit secret and a bit, I think I'm trying to remember now because I wrote it 2 years ago, you see. But I think everybody thinks he's a bit up himself, and then they discover that actually he is caring for his brother, and so he's got another life he's always got to get back to and stuff like that. And his brother's got physical disabilities and is kind of a really nice antidote to him, to the more sort of trying to be a proper cop sort of brother. Yeah, I think they'll be quite useful as a sort of pair of people. Do you know the terrible thing there, Kaz? I've completely forgotten at that point. Jesus, it's terrible. My head is in the end of another book. I was thinking, what is she on about? It's this terrible thing, isn't it, that you start talking about a book that you actually were really passionate about, probably about at least 18 months before you're doing the interview. That's awful. Yeah, he's really good. He's a really interesting character.
You looked really stumped, and I was like, "No, I've done the worst thing in an interview." And asked you
no, the worst thing in an interview is ask me for my 5 favorite books, and then I go really quiet because I can never remember them. So please don't do that. But no, that's really terrible.
Question.
God, and it's funny because, I've been reading the beginning of the book quite a lot because that's the bit you explain to people when you're talking about it, and I haven't gone that far in yet. I've got to read the whole thing, haven't I? That would be a tactful thing to do before I start talking about this book I'm trying to sell.
Well, for the people who read it and need to.
God, it's a very weird business, this writing. I mean, I don't know how the people who write more than that books a year try and keep it all in their heads. Maybe I'm just getting too old and forgetful.
No, I think it's a not uncommon thing. Mike Craven was saying sort of something similar because he writes his so far in advance, doesn't he?
Yeah,
like you talk to him about Poe and Tilly, and he's written 5 books ahead or something. And he was saying he really struggles sometimes because he's still.
But I suddenly remember he was a character I didn't really know. Quite often these characters evolve for me. I don't know who they are at the beginning. I'm not one of these people who makes a really big character plan of everybody. And he was there, and I knew he had to be kind of a bit sort of, ooh, who's that new man in the team, sort of thing like that. And then it was only later when there's a nasty incident that I suddenly realized who he was and why he was sort of protecting his brother and stuff like that, and why he was slightly more because it's like that, isn't it? If you're a carer of anybody, you have a completely separate life that has nothing to do with your professional life because it's just so different, and it has this major impact on how you behave. So he's basically his brother has carers and stuff like that, but he's, in my imagination anyway, but he obviously does quite a lot of the lifting himself.
Donna has said, does new characters mean the series is going to keep going even longer?
Well, let's see. I'd love it to, because I think he'd be a really good fit. It depends how many copies you buy. If you all buy 5 copies each, then I'll keep it going. No, of course I will do. I mean, I don't want to lose Alex. I realise I do have neglected her for a couple of years. I really like Alex and Zoe. I mean, the thing I struggle with is Zoe growing up, because I still wanted to be 15. She was such a brilliant character at 15. I've got this terrible thing that as she's 19 in this book, And as she moves into her 20s, she's actually going to start making sense. Do you know what I mean? I think I've probably got another few years where she can just be angry and irrational at the world, because she's a very clever girl. This is Alex's daughter, who Alex, as a mother, feels she's completely failing all the time and never really understands, which I think most of us who've been parents kind of feel that about all our children anyway. But it's quite a nice relationship. But our children grow up quite fast in books, because every year there are, and because I took a bit of a gap, suddenly she's 19. And I've got to sort of make her older as it goes on, and she's losing some of the dark tunnel of adolescence that she was in. That was great to write. I've always liked that, writing that as a character, because young people can be so irrational and moody, and I think 19, she can still be pretty moody, can't she? But she's actually getting to be quite a smart woman.
But I think in the same way, because you've sort of grown. She's grown with you through the series, hasn't she, as a reader? And she has more of a role in both The Trawler Man and this book, in a way. She's not sort of a character who comes in and out and is a
drag on.
Kind of affecting the events.
Yeah, I almost wrote a plot in which she was actually quite central to an investigation. I might still save that one up, because I quite like that. I was quite into, if you think about what she would be, what issue she'd have, she'd be furious about all this stuff going on, pollution in rivers. And I was thinking there's probably quite a good plot in that, and stuff that she discovers, and that'd be quite nice. Her beginning to because of course her mother would be terrified of her. I mean, in Salt Lane, she kind of got a bit over involved with the character and put her in danger, and there's potential in the next one to do that. So yeah, I might still do that. That'd be quite nice, because she's also got an enormous brain. She's one of these people who's, like some children just seem to absorb science just very naturally, which to those of us who don't absorb science naturally, my brother was like that. She's kind of in some ways based on my brother, who just would read stuff and know everything about tiny, a species of insect, seem to absorb it just, and then spend ages tramping over fields finding that particular. And she's one of those people. And I think that to those of us who find learning that stuff difficult, she's a bit of a mystery, those sort of people. But it could be quite useful, couldn't it, in uncovering something nasty in the woodshed.
It could. It'd be interesting. Have you ever been tempted to sort of write like a little spin-off kind of novella or story about just Zoe? Or Zoe on an adventure doing?
That's a really great idea, actually, because I mean the natural thing would be to write another Bill South one, because Bill South's another character in these books, and he started the series really with the book. The first book was basically from his point of view, and he's an ex-policeman, and it would be, that's the kind of obvious thing to do. It'd be quite nice to write something from Zoe's point of view. The thing I actually thought of doing as a spin-off was, because like these stories originally came from like I wrote 4 stories set in the 1960s with a sort of detective couple, and in the end they get to the end of the series because the woman's pregnant, and in my mind I thought, oh, she's pregnant with Alex, and I kind of knew this, but I didn't really reveal it till I think it's probably The Trawler Man, actually, that there was a connection between the 2 series. I'd quite like to write Girl Alex in London at some point, sort of sometime in the sort of 70s or 80s, being a bit wayward. There's a bit of a slip between the timelines. I'd have to fudge that, because actually it's slightly longer. If she was her real age, she'd be slightly older than she is. But I might find a time to do that. But I wrote a short story the other day based on the Dungeness books, and it was really hard. I used to write short stories all the time before I started writing long books, and actually short stories. I mean, I'm always amazed at people like Mike Craven and Ellie Griffiths, who write brilliant short stories. Ellie Griffiths has got a new short story book coming out just now, which has landed on my desk, and that's a collection. I find them almost as hard to write as a whole book. They're really hard form to do it. I'm always amazed, because there's quite a lot of short stories appearing on UK Crime Book Club. So I went to visit Prospect Cottage, which is the artist Derek Jarman's cabin on Dungeness, and I was given a sort of special visit of it. And I was told you can take photographs, but you're not allowed to show them to anybody. So the only way to say I've been in this thing was to write a short story from what it was like to be inside the cabin. So I wrote a short story which is available on my website if you sign up to my newsletter.
So you could do like an Elly Griffiths collection of short stories, but they could be the different characters from all the different. You could have the young Alex and then the Zoe story.
If only I wasn't such a slow writer, Kaz. If only, like, you know, Mike and Ellie seem to be able to just write at such a high quality at such speed. It takes me a long time to do these things. I mean, I'm quite grateful for the fact I wrote 2 books one year, which is the year I wrote Dead Rich, and I'd love to have another go, but you've got to have a bit of headspace. And I think it's a muscle, actually, short stories. You've got to be thinking of them to be able to write them.
I'm surprised that you're saying you're a slow writer because you're a journalist.
I know, but I like to take, I mean, I've, you know, so it was in my 50s I started publishing novels, and it's just like the most delicious thing. I really enjoy writing them, and I like savoring it. Like at the moment, I'm quite near the end of this book, and I could have finished it a month ago, but I'm really enjoying just going a little bit here, a little bit there. I just really enjoy it, writing that way. And I think if I write too quickly, you know, you see a lot of people who do NaNoWriMo, which is the national November writing month, where you try and basically write a novel in a month. That's my idea of hell. And you see a lot of contemporary writers do write really quickly. They're nothing of writing 3,000 or 4,000 words a day. I'm really happy if I only write 600-700 words a day, because I feel I'm in control of those words. And I just think, you know, that's what I can write more. I have done it, and as a journalist, I used to, like you said. But it's just luxuriating in taking my time over it and trying to get it right. And also because I don't plot. I think most of the people who write quite quickly generally know where they're going, and I tend to write stuff and then have to throw it away because I find out later it's not going to fit.
Martin Edwards said he doesn't believe that people don't plot entirely. He says even the people who say that they pants it know the structure of their own writing in their head.
No, that's 1,000,000% wrong. I think you know, I know instinctively the shape of a book, so I know when I'm feeling about halfway through, I think, oh, something really big's got to happen at this point, and I know kind of. Sometimes I find myself writing something quite slow because when I've finished that, I know that I've got to write something quite, you know, I realize I'm lulling the reader into a sense of false security by writing something quite slow. But I kind of, I don't plot. What I do is when I'm about 2/3 to 3/4 away from the end, is I start looking back and trying to make sense of it. And that's when the plotting happens, after I've written nearly all of it, because then you've got enough to go forward and write the end. But even that can be a vague process. The thing I hate the most about books is that bit where you've got to go back and you've realized that lots of things you've written don't make any sense at all of it. You've got to lose them and stuff like that. And it hurts my head doing it. I could never. When I wrote Deadland, I wrote a plot for that one because it was a chase. Deadland's like the second, I think, in the Cupidie series, and that was a chase. These 2 boys are being chased by a very, very bad person, and I realized a chase is different from a detection novel. And I didn't know how to do it, so I wrote a plot structure for that. And actually, I hated doing that, but I knew I had to. I really enjoy just writing something, and it's a bit of an evolutionary process that if you write something, you know, I sit down in the morning, I think, oh, where I am now. Okay, I've got to go. I've got these characters. They're on a burning boat. What's going to happen to them? And then I'll write something. And then I realize, oh yeah, that doesn't really work. That couldn't happen. So it's very evolutionary, and some bits don't work and some bits do. But I don't very much enjoy doing it the other way. And it's the E.L. Doctorow line that Elly Griffiths quotes a lot, which is like, you know, you kind of know the destination of the book in that there's an arc to a crime book, but you're basically driving in the dark with your headlights on, so you can see the road in front of you. So you know what's going to happen in your next 3 or 4 paragraphs or pages, but you don't really know much before then. But Vaseem Khan said exactly the same thing. He says, I don't believe you write without plots because it's the only way he can write. And he seems to be quite successful.
Yeah, does all right for himself, doesn't he? I feel like you've become an expert in something for every book. So we've got like badges, we've got trawlers, we've got things like that. What's your I mean, obviously there's like wild swimming in this, but
yeah, actually this one a bit less, isn't it? This one's got lots of expertises. Wild swimming and those sort of communities. Yeah, I don't know actually. I didn't have to do, I mean, like, I did so much work for the Trawlerman about sort of brain dysfunction and stuff like that. I was really interested in that and did a lot there, and also went out on the trawler. How focused on a trawler for that one. And this one, I don't think I've learned anything particular, which is a shame because I do believe. I think, yeah. I need to set myself another specialist topic because, I mean, badgers likewise was just amazing. For a little while, I seemed to know a lot about badgers and was hanging out with serious badger people, which was great because, I think anything we do it's like going to an evening class, isn't it? As you're writing the book, you have to learn something as you go along, and you have to contact a few experts. I'm sure I did contact a few experts on this one, but I'm trying to remember what's on it. Who are they? What is this book? Who wrote that?
I learned quite a lot about the power station and the security and things. There's there's bits about that, isn't there, and how highly paid they are. And
yeah, it's a funny little fit police force. I mean, unfortunately, just as I'm finding out a bit about it, they're closing down they've both been decommissioned now, so it's no longer the terrorist target it was. But yeah, it's great. I mean, I found out more about the history of the area. There's a very good book I read called Nanny Goat Island, which a local historian's written, and I spoke to him a little bit, and he that's where I found the body, the concrete man from this sort of book. And yeah, because generally there's at least one sort of strange bird with a natural history in the book or something that I mentioned. Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are bits and pieces. I'll have to look who I thanked. This is very sloppy. Yeah, no, very few thanks in there.
We're keeping you on your toes.
Yeah. But it all started because this woman who is a reader from Hythe replied to, I think it was a tweet saying, can't you kill somebody in Hythe? I said, why? She said, because it's so up itself. And she lives in Hythe. And I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. So I visited Hythe a couple of times and thought, okay, I can see why you could get, because this swimming group I put in the Wild Swimmers are based in Hythe, and there's a sort of poet there, and they are quite sort of nice, and there's quite a rich person there. And it's a very different bit of the coast from Dungeness, which is much more mixed. I know there's billionaires living in shacks there, but there's still the old community of, around, especially if you move down towards Greatstone and places like that. It's quite a a mixed community. But Hythe, yeah, does think itself a bit special. So she wanted me to kill somebody there. So I've done as I said. So any requests?
Well, there you go. You'll have loads in the stream. Like loads of requests. I'm trying to catch up with what people have been saying. Sarah reads an order, she says. Steve said, don't bring book order up with Leslie Lloyd, so I don't know what that means.
Oh, yeah. It's Leslie Lloyd. Yeah. She's very strict by the sound of it.
She obviously likes to read an order. Leslie is saying she can imagine Zoe being an eco warrior and getting arrested.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, definitely. She did actually, that kind of happened to her a bit in the end of Deadland. She was definitely heading to the wrong side of the law on that bit. But yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it? It's really nice to think that she could actually be doing quite illegal stuff and still living at home with her mum.
And Donna said, has your move to Ireland affected your writing in any way?
It's affected my ability to do it in that it's delicious. But it's basically where I'm living in Ireland, which isn't the background now. This is my house in Brighton. The house in Ireland is amazing. It's really in West Kerry, and in the winter, which is when I'm doing the bulk of writing, that there's nobody there. It is literally it's a village called Glenbeigh. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's two ways it's helped. One of which you can just get your head stuck in the book because there's not a lot of people to distract you. The other thing is that I found, and especially after lockdown, we're all stuck at home and we're allowed out to walk, and walking was really useful for me. But living in a city like Brighton, unless you want to jump in the car, you're stuck walking around the streets. This house in Ireland, literally any direction. You can walk to the sea, you can walk to the estuary, you can walk up a mountain, you can walk up into these woods. That's 4 different directions. And from then you can go other places. So every day I was going out walking for an hour or 2 every day, which is good for the head, but it's also really good. I think writing's a really stupid job because you sit down too much. And so it's really good to have a reason to get up and walk around. I think it's also, once you go back and sit in a chair, you tend to write better. If you just stay in the screen all day, trying to write, I think, for me, I find by the afternoon it's like, but if you take a couple of hours striding around, it's kind of, it's good. And I got some good waterproofs because I know it was a wet winter everywhere, but it was really, 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 really wet on the west coast of Ireland. So I just got used to that. You just put on waterproofs and some boots and go out wherever you fancied. And it was, so that it affected it in that way. I feel like the island's not got many people in it. There's 5 million people in the whole lot, and I'm living in one of the least populated bits of an unpopulous country. And it struck me it's going to be quite hard to connect with other people there. And I think if, one of the things I want to do, I'm doing some things with the local library in Killorglin in September and October. And I'm putting on my first event out there with a writer called Sinead Crowley, who's a great Irish writer. And I found a gallery in Killorglin. We're going to do a little event in September and just testing the waters, because for me, it's an excuse to meet people. And of course, people around writing and books are the people that they're kind of our tribe, aren't they? So it makes me happy to catch up with people like that.
And I like that you're sort of still trying to sort of champion authors and find new connections even out there.
Yeah, it'll be good. I mean, like Sinead's in Dublin, and there's a couple of great writers in Cork. Catherine Ryan Howard and Catherine Kerwin down in Cork. So I want to try and hook up with them. There's more writers in Cork, actually. Cork's quite cultural, but Kerry's a bit of a Kerry's the bit they tell. I hope there's nobody listening from Kerry here, but Kerry's the bit that other Irish people tell jokes about because it's so rural, which is great for me, and I love it. It's the most beautiful place in the world. But the writing scene, there's a big arts festival in Listowel, which is really serious sort of writing and stuff like that. But around where I am, there's not much. So it'd be nice to see some stuff going on there.
I like that you love that it's really isolated, and that would be the bit that would put me off of some.
You're a proper city girl, aren't you?
I am really a city girl, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. But the one thing I do like about the city I live in is it's full of parks.
Yes. Amazing. I mean, there's so much greenery where you are. It's phenomenal, isn't it? It's like different from, and it's really established greenery, and people use it really well as well.
Donna has. Oh no, we've got Donna's one. Leslie said she wants an Irish book.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous about that because really I've lived. My dad was Irish. My wife's family are Irish, and I've got lots of Irish connections. But I've lived quite a long number of my years in England, and I think Irish people have actually had it with people pretending to write Irish books. I think there's a lot of bad representations of Ireland as this. What was that film? Something Wish with Lindsay Lohan on. Anybody seen that? An Irish Wish, Lindsay Lohan. You should go and see what Irish people are saying about that film. They are it's beyond being funny anymore. Just the representations of quaint little people and leprechauns and I'm not trying to say I'd write anything like that, but I think you've got to be really cautious about going, because effectively it's another country with a very different history. And I would love to, but I don't think I'd know where to begin until I've been there for quite some time. The other thing is, what's quite annoying is Ireland's got loads of really brilliant writers already. There's a lot of really incredibly talented Irish writers and crime writers. So I think I'll keep a bit quiet about that.
There's a lot of very talented Irish.
There are, aren't there? Yeah.
Yeah. Donna says, will you still be doing Showroom?
Yeah, definitely. October 19th. We are about to fairly soon announced the lineup, and it's going to be good, and it's great. I mean, it's funny. So those who don't know about it, I run a one-day crime festival with Ellie Griffiths, and it's called Fatal Shore, because it's in Shoreham, and it's been absolutely bloody amazing. Both times we've done it, it's kind of blown our socks off, because I've been doing events here in Brighton, where I am now, for several years, and Brighton people are just like, yeah, seen it all. Trying to get them to come out and watch, listen to a crime writer talking, it's hard work. I mean, the event that I used to do with Julia Crouch is still going, and I went down to interview a writer called Tanya Tay at it on Tuesday, and they'd sold 10 tickets by the beginning of the week. Actually, 20 people turned up, which was a real result. In Shoreham, we fill a hall full of 200 people, and it's just that little thing about being out of the city. People feel a lot more relaxed about turning up to that stuff, and purely accidentally, what happened at the beginning is that the green room was booked. We booked a green room, and it turned out to be full of some choir or something like that, so we couldn't have it. So all the authors stayed in the main hall, and they had a blast, because they were mixing with all the readers. And of course, that's all we want to do. We just want to mix with each other. The whole of so we kind of decided that's what we're going to do. We're not going to have this thing where the writers snoot off to a green room and have their own biscuits and tea. They're in with everybody else. There is a kind of place that you can leave your bags and stuff like that, but nobody does, because the audience has always got, it's a really lovely audience, and we sell preposterous amount of books there. I've been to so many book festivals where you're really lucky if you sell 1 or 2 books, and we've got to leave the breaks longer between panels, because people were just queuing up forever to buy books, which is lovely, because that's also really nice for the for the booksellers, and the authors then feel, we do pay them, but if you get 100 quid for a day, which is what we can afford to pay, it's it's not a huge amount of money. You're doing it for love still, and it was it's just great to see all those books being sold. So it's a lovely day out, and we've had some pretty meaty discussions in there as well, which is nice, because you've got this whole lot of people and everybody joins in. So I'm really looking forward to it this year. It's obviously always an organizational nightmare, but I'm looking at it. It'll be great. October 19th, put it in your diaries, come along. And the tickets sell out really quickly, so if you do want to come, please try and book it early, because we sold out. I mean, we did have Richard Osman headlining last year, but we did sell out in about 10 seconds. Might have been something to do with him.
Donna said that she's going to book the day off.
Wow. Great. That'd be brilliant.
It does always look amazing. You always get a really good lineup.
Yeah, it's we've been very lucky with the lineups, and we're really lucky with the people who agreed to turn up. It's just a really nice atmosphere. I couldn't believe how easy it was to, because the first one was successful, and generally, as you know, because you do the sort of great events, and there's a lot of teething troubles with the first one. The first one just went smoothly, partly because we were lucky to be piggybacking on it's part of Shoreham Wordfest, which already exists. So a lot of the things like hiring the hall, we didn't have to do all about that. We just had to get people in there and send them all the information, and sort of organize them into panels and make sure everybody had read books and stuff. It was good. It was great. I'd love to be able to do something like that in Ireland. That would be my dream, because I think where I am in that bit of Kerry is quite, it kind of could do with a bit of you go to the library, everybody's reading loads of books, but there's very little of the events there. So it'd be quite nice to find a way of doing that. So me and Jane, my partner, we're kind of thinking around that.
And it is so special to meet like authors that you really enjoy, or hear them speak about their books. I think if you're a fan of a book, is like an amazing experience to be able to have.
I think also it's really energizing for writers to be there and to meet people who read the books, because you do all the work on your own, and to meet people like that who are respectful of what you do and interested, and actually do remember the stuff you've already forgotten about your plot in the books. No, it's really nice. I mean, it really it's really energizing, those things. I think if you've been to a good festival as a writer, you walk away thinking, I know this is why I'm doing this.
You've been asked on here if you've written any horror, or if you jumped to another genre.
I haven't written horror, and I actually find horror really scary to read. I'd like to have a go, but it's not my go-to place for reading. because I get quite scared reading the books, and I don't like that sort of feeling. I can remember, when I was a kid, there were the Pan Book of Horror stories, which, if you're anybody from my generation, they were absolutely everywhere, and they were kind of really schlocky and brilliant, and they were full of, people who escaped to the attic and they turned on the taps and there was blood coming out the taps because there was bodies stowed in there was just like gorgeous gore and stuff. But I've never written that genre. No, it'd be good. I mean, there's some brilliant horror stuff around, isn't there? But I can't watch horror movies. They scare the crap out of me. My kids watch them all the time from when they were far too young, watching all the Ring and stuff like that. And I just scary.
I can read a book, I think, possibly because I think we're quite similar in that we don't get pictures in our heads.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with a horror book. I might read it in the day, but I can do that. But the horror films, I'm with you.
Yeah. No, it's just I don't enjoy it because I actually genuinely get kind of traumatized by them. Whereas, my daughter watches who's the sweetest woman in the world, will watch the goriest kind of stuff. Doesn't seem to have turned into a psycho killer yet.
I think some of the people, it's like when you meet all the crime authors. All crime authors are genuinely the loveliest people that you meet.
They're a very good bunch. It was a lovely discovery to start. I didn't get published first till I was in my 50s, and so I've worked with lots of other things, and I liked a lot of the colleagues I've worked with and really respected them. But just entering the crime community, you think, oh, these are really sound people. They really look out for each other. It's a really great community.
And yet you're right, like really dark things. And
yeah.
Maybe it's just you get it all out.
I don't know. I think also, and maybe this is what I was thinking, I probably could write horror. I've been told there was a scene in a book called Gravesend, and a couple of people have come to me and said how they were really traumatized by reading this scene, and it was like, really, because I think when you're actually writing it, you're in total control over the scene, and it doesn't scare you in any kind of, even though you've got to imagine it doesn't scare you in the same kind of way because you run all the elements of it, and all we're doing is putting ideas into other people's heads. And I think if it touches a particularly dark place in people's heads, then it can really sort of set things off, can't it? And it's good to do that. I think we should be scared. I think we all read crime to be a little disturbed, don't we? We don't want them. It's one of the things that, unless it's cozy crime, which is more about puzzle solving and stuff like that, which has definitely got its place. We kind of do want to be a bit disturbed by the crime. At least I do. I mean, I don't go full on Chris Carter, much as I love and admire Chris Carter. I like, I'm a bit more like Anne Cleeves. I like 2 or 3 dead bodies. One of them can be quite gory, but the other 2 can just be quite, and I do like to put my protagonist in danger. I like that. I think if I'm a reader, I quite like to feel in peril, and not all crime books have to do that either. But I kind of always find I'm leading towards putting the protagonist in a slightly preposterous place where they're getting threatened.
I quite like that you always focus on people's feelings and reactions to things as well. So you don't just have them like reacting to stuff in quite a cold way or just going through a process. People, like the things that they discover. So we're not giving away a spoiler when we say that Zoe discovered the body, because that's how it starts. But then you do have Zoe being affected by that discovery.
Yes.
Which would be.
Yes, you would be, wouldn't you? And I think that's it's what I like, isn't it? And that's where I got big admiration for people like Anne Cleeves and things like that. I think she writes really good, the way it impacts all the relationships between people. And I'm kind of, for me, the crime stories I quite like are that kind of relationship. And like when I was a kid, I used to read the Maigret books, and I always liked the thing I liked about the Maigret books because there's Madame Maigret, Mrs. Maigret's in there. And he goes home and she's sort of like grumpy about it or saying, why haven't you eaten your food? That suddenly made the crimes far worse for me because they're happening to real people who do normal things in normal places. And that's what I like that if you put in plausible bits of life, I can imagine being in those books a lot more because people are behaving more like me. And I do like, I like the kind of, I was just reading a Sarah Paretsky's book, and actually she's writing a lot more about relations. But the original Sarah, V.I. Warshawski was this wonderful, gutsy young woman who was just like kind of didn't feel like touched by any of it, because she was, and I love those American characters, but who don't do that. It's interesting. She's grown into a much more sensitive protagonist as times goes on. But I was trying to say that, you know, some of those, I don't know, Reacher sort of figures who don't seem very touched by that and just carry on steamrolling through. I do like that as well. But I think that I'm really drawn to those ones where you kind of have some normal reactions to abnormal situations.
It's reflecting on Jonathan Hall used this term when I've interviewed him, and I think it's really true and brings the sort of feelings into the crime of like everyday evil.
Right, that's a good phrase.
It's just like the little things, you know, someone taking money off an old person, or
yeah,
it might actually really happen.
That's great.
And they're like real reactions to it, and I think that is actually almost more frightening.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of situations now more that are, you do something that you don't think is particularly bad, but it begins to have really bad consequences. And, you know, certainly in the book I'm writing at which I can't say anything about, that's exactly what, nobody's done anything they thought was particularly bad, and yet suddenly they're beginning to do really bad things as a consequence of that. And I think that's kind of also plausible, because I think a lot of bad stuff happens. You started off not thinking it was particularly bad, and then things get out of hand.
I'm going to read you Donna's most recent comment on the stream because it's funny. She said she loves how a sentence saying I like 2 or 3 dead bodies and want to be a bit gory is totally normal here.
Yeah, I think we should have. Do you think, you know, in terms of trigger warning, you should have a body count on the front of your book? I mean, I very rarely go above 3, except in the Conspirators and Dead Rich. It was like you'd have to put 60 or 70 on those covers. But you know, in crime fiction, in detective fiction, yeah, it's 2 or 3. You know.
But even in the Conspirators and Dead Rich, you sort of occasionally have that chain of events where like things sort of go out of control by things only being a little bit.
Yes.
Bad to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's just like my life, basically.
Well, let's hope not.
But no, it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, what you're doing in a crime fiction book, isn't it? You're trying to get the buy-in of the reader. And you can do that in all sorts of ways. You can do it with brilliant prose. You can do it with extraordinary scenarios that shock you into a place, or you can try to say this could actually be happening next door to you. As a lot of domestic noir does, you know. But I think you know, you have to have something real in it, which is why when you were asking about what do I research and things like that, I always think I was you know, to digress a bit, I was in a writers group for years with the late CJ Sanson, who died last month, and he used to do that by his history, by getting the history right, and you kind of believe the history so much that you'll believe anything else that happens in the book. And I always think it was really interesting that he was a crime writer, but he chose to do history partly because he loved history so much. And I think that's it. At some point, we have to get the reader to really believe believe in the world. And if you're talking about something real, I think you can start to believe in it. So yeah, so he would. I mean, Chris was phenomenal about researching his books. He'd researched a book for a couple of years before he even wrote it.
I think with you, it's like the characters are really real, and then it's the kind of desolation and like beauty of where it's set as well.
I'm very, you know, I do like hearing that the characters are real. That's really important to me, and I think it's important to most writers. But I spent a long time interviewing people as a journalist because I used to do kind of magazine journalism, and I did a lot of interviews where I thought what I'll do is if I can get them to speak in sentences that are uniquely them, because at the time I never learned shorthand, and you're supposed to know shorthand, and I thought actually shorthand's a bit of an impediment because you're already translating it. So I used to get the tapes and then spend bloody days transcribing these. You know, if you do an interview for 3 hours, that could be like 2 days transcribing it. But I used to really use their language, and that taught me a lot about the way that people speak so differently. That tells you a lot about how they are. But I also did this column for the Observer magazine called The Small Ads, back when there were small ads. And I used to go and call up a classified adverts every week and say, now this is a bit of a sort of thing to explain, that all stories have change in them. Something changes in a story. That's kind of how stories work. my theory was that if somebody's selling something or advertising something, there's a change going on in their life. I'm going to call them up, and if in 10 minutes I can work out what the change is going on in their life by selling that old wedding dress or whatever, that something's happened in their life that they need to do that, I'm going to find a way of getting them to tell me that story. And then I'd print that. So I'd print the advert, then I'd print the story underneath it. And I used to do that for about 3 or 4 years in the Observer. And that taught me as well that everybody is completely eccentric. You know, whenever you get to somebody that everybody sounds really normal and they're doing a normal job and they're being very professional, and you just take that thing and you'll begin to find people's eccentricities. And if you can find a little bit of every character's eccentricity, not trying to say everybody's like completely bonkers, but everybody's got something that's slightly different, and you kind of need to know to find that slowly in a character, or let it reveal itself anyway. Does that make any sense?
It does. Sam says you write an excellent dual timeline as well, which she loves to read.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. There's also the advantage that if you write two, you're basically getting 2 books for one, aren't you, with a dual timeline? But it means you can leave really great cliffhangers, because you drop one story just when it's getting interesting and say, oh, and about that other story you've forgotten about. And that's a nice sort of thing, which I discovered during the Birdwatcher. You know, the Birdwatcher had 2 twin timelines of this main character and his childhood, and they were both ultra tense, but you could just drop one story for a while and go back and tell the other one, and the reader's going, hold on, what happened, what's happening in the other one? And so it makes it more compelling as a story. It's quite a nice thing to do. I try not to do it every time, because I don't want to become just Mr. Dual Storyline, but it's very tempting. I mean, this one I'm writing at the moment, I've got a dual storyline. I'm actually wondering whether I should take out the dual storyline or really run with it. And you see, this is what I mean about not plotting. I'm right at the end. I'm literally like 3 or 4 pages from the end, and I've only just realized I might actually drop part of it.
No. Sam is like your biggest fan, I think. We're all one of them. She gets ridiculously excited about seeing you on things. We've got 2 minutes left.
Sam was so nice right at the beginning. She was one of the first people to really respond about my books, and I really appreciate it. You know, it's kind of lovely to hear that stuff. It really, it keeps you buoyed up, because it can be quite demoralizing sometimes. Sorry, you've got 2 minutes and I'm interrupting.
No, it's fine. Steve, who also says you're one of his favorite authors.
Thank you, Steve.
And it's reminded him of how much he's learned from your writing: bird watching, super yachts, PTSD, cults, and badgers.
Oh, that's a very good list. Thank you, Steve.
We've got 2 minutes left. You're going to spend 1 minute telling us what you've read recently and really enjoyed.
I've read recently the new Cassie Raven by A.K. Turner, which is called Deadfall, which I'm reading right now. I've read the new Trevor Wood Silent Killer, which is his next book. It's a standalone thing. It's here on my desk. It's absolutely gripping and really excellent. I'm just about to launch into The Man in Black, which I was showing earlier, the short stories from Ellie Griffiths. There's a few others as well. I've been getting through a lot just recently. And yeah, I read Deadfall by Sarah Paretsky, which is absolutely brilliant return to form. And I think a lot of people said, oh yeah, Sarah Paretsky, because she was big in the 80s and 90s. But Pay Dirt, her new one, is really worth reading. V.I. Wachowski is just like a real character, and she kind of, it's hard, it's like a lot of that sort of feminist stuff from that time doesn't seem like news now, but you have to remember at the time there was nobody writing women like her. And I think that inspired a lot of people. You talk to Val McDermott about people like that, about what kicked her off, and it was people like Sarah Paretsky.
And then in your remaining not quite minute, remind everyone what they're going to go away and buy.
Oh, you are going to go away and buy, out next week, The Wild Swimmers, the latest novel in the Alex Cupidi series. It's quite a good title, isn't it, The Wild Swimmers? Partly because lots of people are wild swimmers. Do you wild swim, Kaz?
I do not, no.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a really weird phenomenon, isn't it? Loads and loads of people, mainly women, are wild swimming these days. And I just quite like the idea of it. If you call a book something like The Birdwatcher or The Wild Swimmers, people begin to already make the story in their head before they've even bought it. So as you can imagine, not all the wild swimmers come out of the sea alive.
So go and buy it and find out what happens.
Yes, please do. Yeah, if you want a signed copy, City Books in Hove, go to their website. They've got a little bit they'll arrange for signed and dedicated copy, or coffee even. Actually, they don't do coffee. They're really old school, grumpy booksellers, but they're lovely.
No, it's good. We need to promote indie bookstores as well. So
yeah, I mean, we're very lucky in Brighton. We've also got Kemp Town Books in the other side of Brighton, and they are bloody excellent. Yeah, I'm connecting with booksellers in Ireland. They're really good.
And then it's all left to say thanks.
Well, thank you so much, honestly, and thanks to everybody out there. It was really brilliant to be with you all. And I can't see the comments, so I'm going to go onto the website now and have a good look and answer them.
Do, because there's loads.
Oh, that's really nice. Oh, lovely. Great.